So moving back into Performance Point, we'll start by building some KPIs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on my KPI dashboard items. And there's two templates. There is a blank KPI and an objective KPI. The difference is objective KPI allows you to have multiple KPIs rolling up into one assessment or one ranking. So you'll notice that the way this, you've got, these three, 1, 2, 3, that's like 3 KPIs just in the icon, rolling up into a summation ranking. So maybe I'm ranking how we're doing with our issue count or risk count and on budget. And based on those 3 thresholds, I want to know an overall ranking. So most of the time, I use a single KPI, and then on my report, I might show all 3 of those KPIs. So I'll go through an example building a blank KPI. So what I've done is I've said I want to build a new dashboard item, which is a KPI, and it puts in a blank, use my blank template, and it's called a new KPI. So what I want to do is start by changing the properties of this. So we're going to call this our risk factor. Okay, and then we're going to go back over to our editor, and we're now going to look at ranking our, so anything that has a, we've looked at the various risk count, and then we also looked at another value, which was our the threshold. I'm just going to bring up our issue risk analysis. It was called our risk impact. Okay, so the risk impact, we've got 10 up to 15, 14. So it ranges from nothing right on up to 15. So we're going to have to come up with a range as to what constitutes a red, what constitutes a yellow, and what constitutes a green. So maybe anything 10 and over is a red, anything greater than 1 is a yellow, and anything else will just set up as green. So we'll use the risk impact as the field that we're going to do our analysis against. Okay, so I'm going to go back over to my KPI, which was called my risk factor. And what I have to do is I have to map my actual value to the field in the database that contains that. And then I have to identify what my target is. So obviously in this case my target would be 0, low risk. So we're going to talk about 2 things. First of all, mapping the actual value and then deciding what our target's going to be. So under the actual value, I'm going to go over here to my data mappings and click on the link. And I'm going to change the source. It's always defaulting to just a value of 1, just as a placeholder. So I'm going to change my source so that I'm linking to that same analysis services data source, which was our SharePoint data. So we're going to click OK. And then once it's connected to that data source, now it wants us to select a measure. So it's, again, it's the same fields that we were looking at before. We've got issue count, risk count, and we had a field risk exposure. Okay, so I'm going to select risk exposure, and then where it says aggregate members by, well, do I want to take a sum? Do I want to take a min, a max, a count? Well, we're going to go with the default, which will take the value itself. And then click OK. Okay, so under calculation, when I click on the default, I want to set that to the data value. So if the data value is 14, take on the data value 14. If the data value is 5, take on the data value 5. So whatever the data value is, take on that value for that particular project. Okay, so the risk exposure is the measure that we're pulling from our data source, and we want the data value to be looked at. This link here where it shows the number is just showing the format. So if it was a currency, I could change that to currency, but since it's just a straight number, I'll leave that to number. And then we want to compare our target to the actual. So now we need to focus on, what our target is, okay? So again, we'll set this to a numeric format, and the fixed value for our target could be, in fact, 0. So our target is a fixed value of 0, and our default, we're not pointing to any sum, min, no data value, so we don't need to change anything on our calculation. Now we get into our indicators. Okay, we can pick a different style of indicators, and we can pick our scoring pattern using this link that I'm pointing to that says set scoring pattern and indicator. So when I click on that link to set the scoring pattern and indicator, there's many choices when you look at the scoring patterns. There's increasing is better, decreasing is better, or closer to target is better. So closer to target is better, obviously, but that indicates that if I choose closer to target, then I could have negative numbers as well. So I'm not likely to have negative numbers, but what I'm saying is that closer to target uses the target as the midpoint. So 0 is the midpoint, and it's anything to the right. So green is close to the midpoint, whether it's positive or negative. Anything further away, is going to be whatever color we identify on either side. So I don't want to do closer to target. I actually want to do decreasing is better. Okay, so the lower the number, the better. And then what I want to do is I want to set my own values, what my target values are. So I'm actually going to band to a numeric value. Okay, so I'm going to select my band to numeric value, and then I have to choose the best, the actual, the worst. I also have the ability to band to a stated score. So I could then say, well, gee, I don't really know. My database is going to change over time, so I don't know what the best and the worst is. So what I could do is just come up with a stated score that says, anything 10 is the worst, 5 is kind of in the middle. So I could go ahead and band it to a stated score. So if I go to the next step, then I can choose the images, and then finally I'll get to choose what those scores are going to be. So if I choose images, you'll see there's lots to choose from here. And I wouldn't want to choose something like this image, thermometer, because the thermometer, the low numbers are going to show in red and the high numbers are going to show in green. So I want to pick something that I can control, something simple like this red, yellow, green, or these, stoplight symbols is fine. So if I select my stoplight and go to the next step, then I get to specify my data mapping. Okay, so fixed values, this was set to 0. And now I'll click Finish. Now I get to determine what my scoring pattern is. So best is going to be 0, and it's going to remain in green up to a value of, let's say, 2. And then it's going to jump to yellow up to a value of, let's say, 8. And then it's going to go to red. Anything, well, I could just throw a number like 20 out there, but anything greater than 20 will also show up in red as well. So I've set my thresholds at 2, 8, and 20. So we had originally talked about keeping it a little simpler and just going 1, 10, and then picking anything greater than 10 is going to show up as red. So I just wanted to show you how it changes the diagram as you change those values. Okay, so the fixed value is 0, and it is going to compare my risk exposure for each project against this range. Defining KPIs, there's a lot that you can do here, and it's really kind of the foundation to building your scorecards. So I'm just going to see if there's any hands up.